Some Bay Area residents kind of feel like David fighting Goliath. They don't want radio frequency emitting cell towers all over their neighborhoods. But the wireless industry says it needs them to keep up with demand. Consumer Watch reporter Julie Watts on why the carrier always gets its way.
The proposed site for the antenna that Verizon seeks to install is right outside my front window.
10-year-old Om Gorley wants his voice heard. He's the youngest of a group of residents trying to stop Verizon from installing mini cell towers, in some cases right outside their windows.
I will be exposed to the increased radio frequency emissions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
But the Federal Communications Act says you can't consider health concerns as long as wireless companies follow FCC radiation guidelines that haven't been updated since 1996. When this was state-of-the-art technology.
This antenna should not be approved.
So, the only way to win is on a technicality. And of the hundreds of challenges over the years, these 5 families were the first to win an appeal at the San Francisco Appeals Board based on a technicality regarding lack of notice.
These are not minor occurrences.
But now they're back after Verizon's cell tower installer, Crown Castle, appealed the appeal.
A number of issues were raised at the original hearing about RF emissions are simply not relevant to the court's, to the board's consideration.
To date, no one has successfully stopped a cell tower installation or modification, thanks in part to a single line snuck into the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, which states, in part, a local government may not deny and shall approve any eligible facilities request for a modification to an existing wireless tower.
It only makes sense in the context of a government that is influenced and owned by these large interest groups.
Dan Newman runs maplight.org, a nonprofit that tracks money's influence on politics. His group crunched the numbers and found AT&T alone spent a whopping $124 million lobbying the federal government since 2008. Verizon came in a close second at $118 million. He says not only did that help to buy them protection from local challenges, but he says it also bought them influence over the very agency that is supposed to regulate wireless companies.
The appointments to powerful regulatory bodies in Washington, like the Federal Communications Commission, have to be approved by influential members of Congress. And those members of Congress are exactly the targets of all the lobbying and campaign contributions by the wireless industries.
He says, for example, the former chairman of the CTIA Wireless Association, Tom Wheeler, now heads up the FCC. And former FCC Commissioner Meredith Baker is now the CEO of the CTIA. In a statement, the FCC writes, Chairman Wheeler is a proven advocate for consumers and has held the wireless industry accountable for violations of the Commission's rules. However, in its statement, the wireless industry points out that the FCC still says there is no reason to believe towers could constitute a potential health hazard. It's been nearly 20 years since the FCC has examined Wi-Fi and cell phone radiation guidelines, in spite of worldwide petitions from environmental scientists to re-examine safe exposure levels.
I mean, think about how absurd it is that citizens aren't able to speak or bring up or have considered health concerns.
Move to deny the rehearing request.
Back at the appeals board, residents got a second reprieve.
Aye.
Commissioners are standing by their decision to deny Verizon's permit for the 5 cell towers in their neighborhood.
Thank you. Yeah.
But they're not hopeful the victory will last.
They can reapply for permits, they can do things, so we're worried what's next.
Verizon and Crown Castle had no comment. Turns out that victory was short-lived. Shortly after that hearing, the city closed that so-called loophole. Verizon reapplied and was reissued permits for those 5 cell sites. Meanwhile, the governor recently signed a controversial bill that will now further limit the ability for cities to block new cell towers. Julie Watts, KPIX 5.